Anyway, welcome to Growing in Uncertainty. My name is Tess Miller, and through my business, Wings Unfolded, I do coaching and sound healing and therapeutic music. And my goal, my MO in this life is to meet with people when they are at their most stuck moment in life to help them get clarity so they can start moving forward again. And so that's what these videos are about, is an opportunity for me to share where I might be feeling stuck in my own life and how I'm working through that so that we can grow in uncertainty together. And my guest today is my partner, Scott Harding, Dr. Scott Harding. Do you want to tell everyone about yourself?
I go with this one. I teach music theory and composition at Central Michigan University. I am the drummer and co-lyricist in the Michigan-based rock band Iron Fist. And I am sometimes struggling to adult my way through life.
I mean, I think we all are. I forgot to turn the space heater off.
Oh.
Would you please? He is closer, and he has wheels.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, welcome to Growing in Uncertainty.
Thank you. The studio is lovely.
Well, good. Normally you're upstairs watching from above.
Right.
Your ivory tower.
Yes. Otherwise known as my desk.
Yes.
In the spare bedroom.
Right. So we were having a conversation the other day about failure and the timing of failure, that as we were having the discussion, I had that thought of, why aren't we recording this?
For sure.
So as I was trying to figure out, what do I want to do for my show this week? Scott actually brought it up and said, hey, what about that conversation we were having about failure and the timing of failure? And I said, yes, you're right. Absolutely. Let's do that. So failure is one of those things that is an uncomfortable experience, certainly for everyone. And depending on how we respond to failure, we can certainly get stuck to varying degrees, depending on, a lot of different circumstances. When the failure happens, why the failure happens, who's related to the failure, any of the stories that are going on in your life. So we're going to kind of focus on the idea of timing at first anyway. We're both going to share failure stories and how the timing played into that or may have had an effect on it. So how about sharing your failure story?
I have no idea what she means. I've never been anything but successful in my life. Good night. No, I think the thing that we had first really started with was, and I'm going to try really hard not to smudge your story, but the conversation evolved out of you talking about being chair challenged in a certain grade, and like the other person actually won over you, and you felt like that was a pretty big failure as someone who had always been like first chair. And it made me think of my story as a musician and how I became a musician, which was similar, at least at the outset. I was the best drummer in my school. I was the best drummer in my school. And there was just no sense of like lordly supremacy. It was just kind of, this is what it is. I can play the instruments that I'm required to play, and I have a sense of the musicality, and I was the best drummer in the school. When it came time to go to college, I knew I wanted to major in music, but I also knew I did not, I had the sense that I did not want to be a band director because both my parents were band directors, and their jobs seemed really glamorous sometimes, and really, when your parents do the thing, it's like seeing behind the curtain. You know, like you see what all the levers and stuff are, and you get to see a bit of the dark side of it too. And I was like, no, I don't want to deal with that. So when it came time to audition for college, I found out that you could actually audition in playing your instrument. So I could go to college and be a drummer major. The problem with being like long acknowledged the best drummer at my high school was that there was never any failure. There was never any chair challenge for me. I was just always the person. So when it came time to take my college auditions, I didn't prepare at all. I think that I was playing some keyboard thing that I might have done with the band. It might have been Flight of the Bumblebee. And I might have almost had it memorized.
Almost.
No, I mean, this is no lie. And I went to the University of Michigan with that as my audition
Yeah.
and was roundly, no thank you, like just roundly refused. I remember I actually had been accepted to the U of M in general, but they did not ultimately accept you if you didn't make it into the college or school that you were applying to. So since the School of Music, or whatever it was called at the time, said no, then the whole thing was a wash. And that was like really shocking because I thought I really wanted to go to the U of M. I think I thought I wanted to march there. I mean, I had been to a couple of games. Their marching band was really impressive. So go marketing. And I think that's why I wanted to go there, because I wanted to be in the marching band and play my drum. And then I didn't get accepted, and it was like really, it was an emotional setback, and kind of tough to deal with. Except I didn't really change my MO when I went to apply at CMU, because I did the same thing. I went in with the same half-baked, probably, this isn't memory, but like likelihood knowing me, probably with the attitude that those cranks at U of M don't know what they're talking about. I'll go to Central. When my parents went, I'll go to Central. It'll be great. They have a great percussion studio. I'll go there. And the same thing happened. I got there, and I remember the man who ended up being my band director, who knew my parents, came out and talked to my mom and said, we were really expecting a lot from Scott, and it was quite a disappointment. Yeah, oh, for sure. Those were real wake-up moments that when you do a thing and you're like, I guess, naturally good at it, you can skate for a long time, and the skating by can feel like success. But when the, I guess, inevitable end to that comes, it can really be foundation shaking.
Well, and it sounds like you had a lot at that time in your life. A lot was riding on it, because we're talking about your future.
Yeah, and I was maybe a little bit dim I was auditioning as a 17-year-old. I didn't turn 18 until after I graduated from high school. But a dim concept of that. That's not the fault of my high school counselors. I just I didn't quite grasp the enormity of that you just said, until it came to, oh, well, this School of Music didn't accept you either. The catch was that CMU, like the U of M, had accepted me in general, but they didn't have that pesky rule that if the school you were applying to said no, then the university as a whole said no. So CMU accepted me, and those were the two places I auditioned. So I went to CMU in the fall, and they also had this kind of clever little loophole that didn't prevent me from signing up for my music major classes. So I just acted like I was a music major. I signed up for Theory 1, and we had a survey of music course that Roger taught. And, I signed up for all the freshman theory classes, or freshman music classes. The only thing I couldn't do was actually take lessons from Bob Honer, the percussion instructor. But Mark Van Hoos was a upperclassman, and he taught my lessons and prepped me to retake my audition in the spring.
How did you know to do all of that? Did somebody tell you, or you just...
No memory. I have no
Okay.
memory at all. I know that I went to an orientation sometime in June after I graduated, and I mean, this is a time period when if you wanted to bump into a class, you still literally went to Finch Fieldhouse and stood in line with a card
Yeah.
at tables and stuff. So I have no memory. I suspect I probably just filled out my class list my freshman year as if I was intending to be a music major,
Yeah.
and nobody said I couldn't.
Right.
So yeah, I took lessons, re-auditioned, and then was accepted.
Okay. So at the time, how did that experience register with you in terms of failure?
It was a clarifier, I think, in the sense that it was possible to fail. So you and I have often talked about this sort of idyllic childhood that I've had where there were never any obvious hardships. You know, you learn as an adult after the fact that, yeah, we had Pepsi instead of Coke this week because the Pepsi was on sale. But which soda was on sale is a first world hardship that I ever heard before, you know.
Right.
So, but you know, there was no conflict. There was no, so failure did never seem to be something that could happen. I I had failed at the little league because I wasn't any good at playing baseball. But all that did for me was cement the idea, and I suspect we'll come back to this, was cement the idea that I didn't really like playing baseball. And so it didn't feel like a failure.
Yeah.
I would never have thought to couch it in those
Yeah.
terms at 10 or 11 years old.
Right.
But it didn't feel like a failure. It was just like, all right, mom said I had to finish the season. I finished the season, didn't care for it, not going back.
Yeah.
So it just clarified that failure was actually on the platter of options.
Yeah. Sure. What do you think, how do you think your experience of that failure was shaped by the timing of it?
That plays off of the conversation that we had, where it seems like the longer you go without a failure, the more drastic the failure becomes. So I hadn't really had any kind of musical failure all through high school. To be dealt that after I'd already graduated from high school was a little shocking. But in typical idyllic fashion for me, it all worked out because I practiced and I redid my audition, and then they accepted me as a music major.
You did the work.
I did then.
Yeah. Right. But it took having those two experiences, those two eye-opening experiences of, oh, what I've been doing up until this point isn't going to take me any further.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So, so yeah, it's a really interesting idea that the longer you go in your life without having had failure in a particular area of your life, the harder it can seem, you know, the bigger the wake-up call. To realize, oh, wait a minute, I gotta change how I do this thing. But it sounds like you were motivated.
For a while.
Uh-huh.
For a while.
Okay.
I think I was not really clear that. I think everything felt as if it was already the end goal. I did not have apparently a good capacity to see every one of these steps merely as mini goals. You know, so for some people, graduating from high school is the goal. I graduated, I'm done. I'm going to go get a job. for me, finally, like getting into college and being told I can study music seemed like the goal. And then when I got there, I found out not that I wasn't good at it. I certainly went from being top dog in my very small high school to just bootlickingly bad, like the very bottom of the barrel. But I really had my eyes opened to what it would take to rise, and son of a gun, I didn't like it. I liked playing drums. I liked marching band. I liked playing my drum set. I did not like practicing the marimba. I liked percussion ensemble well enough. I enjoyed that camaraderie and music making atmosphere, but I didn't like to practice, and I mostly didn't.
Yeah. So then what would you say was the ultimate lesson of all of your failure? No, all that moment of failure.
I just think that any failure that I think of has been a good clarifier. Failing to get into, failing to be accepted into a school of music told me I had to work harder. I did the work, at least as far as was necessary for CMU, which was quite competitive with Bob Horner at the helm, at the helm of the percussion studio. I did the work, but then in my mind, that was the end of it. I did finally figure out that there was more work involved to actually continue. Once that was presented to me, the clarifier was, I really don't want to do this.
Yeah.
And then I didn't know there were any other options. That was fairly crushing.
Yeah.
But then my friend Tony, I think it was Tony, said, oh, by the way, you can major in composition. Don't you write some music? And I was like, yeah, you can do that? And he's like, yeah, that's what I do. I'm like, okay. So I failed to get into the School of Music at first because I hadn't done the work. Then I did the work and got in. Then I found out what the work looked like afterwards to kind of stay in and really thrive. And at that point, I made the decision, I just don't want to do this work. That wasn't so much a failure, but the earlier failure at least clarified my choices.
Right.
And I said, I don't care to do this work.
Yeah. Yeah, and what's great is that you had the opportunity to leave percussion performance on your terms. Just like the Little League,
Right.
I don't care that I'm not doing great at this because I don't want to do the work. I don't like this. This is not my jam.
Yeah.
Okay. Anything else you want to add to that?
Not like from that era.
Okay.
Because we both know what the really kind of like the last step was of all of that was trying to get into grad school.
Right. Yeah.
Which was kind of just like Operation Repeat.
Yeah.
I had done the work necessary to be a composition major, but there were some professor elements who didn't think it was enough and said so in their letters of recommendation. And so once again, I found myself being denied access to grad school to continue studying composition. And that was a clarifier, again, in terms of, all right, I've now learned twice. The first time I learned, I hadn't done the work. The second time I learned that maybe what felt like the right amount of work to me didn't necessarily translate to other people. But that other people have some sort of say or sway in terms of what you're allowed to do. I don't like the way that rolled off, but that's what it felt like.
Yeah.
I was being disallowed from pursuing graduate study because 2 of my 3 letters of recommendation were, in fact, the polar opposite of letters of recommendation. And so that clarified for me the work that I do needs to be genuine hard work, but it also needs to be recognizable to the people who are going to care.
Yeah.
That time it stuck.
Yeah. And what did you have to do in order to get into grad school then?
I called in a lot of favors from people who had gone to Michigan State, not as comp majors, but as band directors. But they knew the person who was the band director there at the time, and they started calling and bugging him and saying, "Hey, we heard you turned down Scott Harding. Can you maybe go check that?" And then he went to my good mentor, Jerry Hutchison, and said, "I'm getting all these calls about Scott Harding. I don't know who the hell that is. Can you look at this guy's file again?" And then they accepted me conditionally, or what do they
Yeah.
call it, probationary acceptance. And I had to maintain a certain GPA and just prove that I could handle it,
Yeah.
which I did at that point rather handily.
Yeah.
Lesson finally sunk in.
And how do you think that that final lesson has shaped the way that you've proceeded in your career?
Recognition of what failure looks like, and its obverse, recognition of what success looks like, the recognition of what it takes to find success, and as a condition of that, do you even want to do it? You know, I recognized what conditions needed to be met to be successful as a percussion performance major and decided I don't want to do that. I then recognized what it looked like to have success as a graduate student in composition and said, yes, I do want to do that. And then when I got my graduate assistantship and became a teacher after all, joke's on me, I recognized what kind of work was necessary to do that. So, you know, all of the hours that I sit here cobbling together lesson plans for my classes now, I'm demonstrably willing to do that work. I probably would never have recognized which work I was willing to do if I hadn't initially failed at a thing to recognize it in the first place. I feel like that went in a circle.
Yeah, sort of.
Okay.
But, you know, that's awesome that every step of the way you were given that opportunity to make that realization and then proceed, you
right.
know, in the direction that you wanted to go. And just the idea of following, maintaining your awareness of, well, what is it that I really do want is really important. It sounds like you were really following something that was at the core of who you are. Whether or not you were conscious of that, you know, but you just knew, I don't want to do this.
I had to try it first, but yeah.
Yeah. Well, and yeah, I mean, how can you know whether or not you do or don't want to do something unless you try it first?
Fair point.
So, you know, that I think is really important for people too, that when they fail at something, but they might realize I still want to pursue this thing because I really want to do it. On the other side of achieving the opposite of failure in that situation might turn out to be clarity that they didn't expect getting. So this is kind of an interesting thing.
And I may be the eternal optimist. You know,
Maybe.
Shush now. Some other people could have been faced with some of those failures and been dissuaded from the further pursuit.
This is a sign I shouldn't be doing this.
Sure.
Right.
So I don't know. It's probably a lot of personal makeup too.
Absolutely. So my failure story, just looking at the time, I don't even know what time it is. I didn't reset my clock after the power outage.
It's 6:57 blinking over and over.
I don't think it is. But anyway, so my story in a nutshell is that I was first chair flute in my middle school band. Every single time that we had chair challenges. And one day in the 8th grade, I did not get first chair. I got second chair. And my middle school band director at the time, shout out to Mrs. Houston, not that she's watching, but I don't know, word gets around.
She's good people.
She is good people. She, at the time, told my parents at a parent-teacher conference that she was really glad that that happened because she was worried that at this developmental stage in my life, if I only ever had success on my flute, if it went on too long, she was worried that a failure later on in my flute studies would mean I just would give up and I wouldn't want to do the work to get to the other side. And so that was a good lesson for me in looking at, okay, failure can be a good thing because it can make sure that you're continuing to work hard at what you're doing. The problem for me was that the real way that that lesson manifested was if you don't prepare above and beyond and make yourself crazy with anxiety, preparing for every single little thing, then you're doing it wrong, right? Obviously. So auditions and chair challenges and performances became really high anxiety, high stress experiences for me over the course of my continued flute study through high school, through college, grad school, and beyond, to the point where I would go to orchestral auditions and it was as if somebody took me out of my body and put me into the body of a monkey and gave me a flute and said, go play this really hard excerpt. And I didn't have control over my body. And of course I had monkey mind because I'm a monkey. And, it was like I wasn't even myself playing my instrument. And it was incredibly frustrating because I would do all this work to get ready for the audition. And yet I just didn't have any kind of control. So, I did end up playing in orchestras, though, as a sub. I would get on a lot of sub lists and whatnot. And then eventually I did make it into an orchestra and have been playing in an orchestra regularly for years. But I sort of discovered the same thing in a lot of ways well, let me back up before that, because failure, every single time I wouldn't make it through an audition, every single time I wouldn't win an audition, that for me became viewed as I failed. Once again, I failed. I didn't get to my expectation. I expect to win an audition someday. I expect to get to this level of my playing. I expect to achieve this job or whatever. And every single time that wouldn't happen, I would feel like a failure. And so fast forward, I'm working at several small private colleges and playing in orchestras on the weekends, and I'm a therapeutic musician, and I've got all of these things in my career, and I still don't feel I still feel like a failure. So as I was talking this out with Scott the other day, I realized what was pretty amazing about all of that is that one of the things that's easy for us to forget along our paths is why we make the decisions that we make. And maybe that's not hard for anyone else. Maybe it's just me. But it's really easy for me to forget why did I make this decision in the first place. But as I looked back on it, I realized that I remembered that one of the reasons why I stopped doing orchestral auditions was because I had started a family at that point in my life. And I really sat down and thought about the logistics of, okay, if I play in all these orchestras, I'm gone basically every night and on weekends. When do I get to see my kid? Do I ever get to say goodnight to my kid? And what about my husband? He works all day. Do I get to see him? How does that work? And then I also realized that the reason I made the decision to work at all of these small private colleges was because I could teach during the day at those places. Whereas if I were teaching at public schools, I have to wait until 3 or 4 o'clock in the afternoon and teach all the way until, I'm have to go to rehearsal for my my orchestras. So every single decision that I made at a certain point in my career, on the one hand, might have felt like a failure because I wasn't pursuing the thing that I was trained to do. But on the other hand, it was a humongous success because my values in that time had changed. Once I had a family, I really valued that family time. And instead of abandoning my career, which is perfectly fine, by the way, I'm totally not making a judgment about anybody ever who has decided, I can't do this anymore. I need to do something that aligns with family. I'm just saying that what I ended up doing was finding ways to teach and to perform during the day. And that is something that I need to remember to celebrate, that I followed my values. And that really helped me kind of shift my mindset around, no, wait a minute, my career hasn't been a failure. It has actually been an enormous success. The fact that I can still do what I'm trained to do and be more or less on a family schedule. Sometimes there are exceptions. Last weekend is one.
But it's rare.
It's rare. I'm a weekend warrior in the orchestral world. So anyway, that was something that came out of our conversation, was that, every single failure that you and I have ever had, we've managed to, sit with it, certainly, and say, all right, now what do I want to do with this? And the decisions that it sounds like you made were very much based on, what do I want to do? And my decisions have always been based, on what I want to do, but also more like, well, what do I value? I really value having this time with my family, or I value being able to play my instrument in this way, or having independence on the recitals that I want to play. So yeah, that's just something that I wanted to share with anybody who's watching Growing in Uncertainty. If you've been experiencing any kind of failure in your life, maybe think about what are the lessons that you're learning from that failure. Is it really a failure? It might not be. It might just be an expectation or an expected outcome was not happening for you in that moment. I know that might sound like mincing words, but it really is a mindset shift to say, well, I had a real clear expectation for this and it didn't happen, so now what?
Well, and I think just hearing you say these words now about values, I think that I can only speak for what we do in our career, but I can probably extrapolate out to many other careers, that a sense of what is valued in those careers can be really skewed. And if only, it's like when they say history is written by the winners. If all you get is two people fight and one person loses, the other person writes the story about it. If you never get to hear the loser's story, you're getting half the story.
Right.
When it comes to values, we can be really stuck in accepting this value system that has been put on us by our experiences, that for, in our case, like graduate school experiences, we define success by you have to have this kind of job and you have to play in this kind of ensemble, and sometimes it needs to be okay to say that's not what I value anymore, but that's also not a failure.
Right.
But it can be hard to, it can feel like claiming, like you lost the war but you claim victory. Like it can feel like we're trying to do that kind of thing, claim victory, and there will probably be people who won't acknowledge it, and those people just need to be silenced. No, they need to be ignored. I have a hair somewhere.
Well, yeah, and that's, yeah, thank you for outlining that, because that's a really important part of it, that sometimes our beliefs about success or failure can be shaped by the mentors and the teachers and the adults in our lives that say, this means success, this means failure. I remember one time having a conversation with someone, a student, years and years and years ago, and at one point they said, well, someday you want to be principal flute in an orchestra because that's like the best job that you can have as a musician, right? And I said, and this was after my whole journey of discovering what I value and how to apply my values to what I do and the decisions that I make. And I said, no, not for me. It might be for somebody else, but everybody's different. And, my hope is that in that moment, it was an eye opener for my student, because that was very much that one track mind of, culture tells me that this is what I'm supposed to value and want and strive for. But if you think about it, how many principal flute players are there in orchestras in this country?
I don't know. It sounds like a bunch if you just say a number, 600. It sounds like a bunch.
Yeah.
But it's not when you compare the number of professional and even semi-professional fluters there are.
Right. Yeah. I can't even think of another field that would be comparable to the low number of people who actually hold that. Well, sports.
Yeah, for sure. Professional sports.
Quarterbacks in sports ball.
Rah-rah.
There aren't very many of those, and they're very competitive. And if somebody said, I only want to be a famous sports ball player, then, that's going to be an expectation that may be achieved. Yay. But, it's not as likely. And what are the chances that person's values change over the time of trying to pursue that career anyway? So, it's when people try to base their success not on their own personal values, but on society's values.
Bing.
That is a recipe for burnout for a lot of people.
Yep. Faux show.
Yeah. Well, is there anything else that you want to add to that?
I don't think so. No.
All right. Well, I hope this message resonates with you. Thank you all for watching today. If you want to contact Dr. Harding for any reason whatsoever, how can they learn more about your creative pursuits?
The easiest way to get in touch with me is through email, which is HARDI1, the number 1 SR. Looks like it reads Hardy1SR at cmich.edu. Don't call me ever. If we're friends on Facebook, you can certainly send me a Facebook message. If you have my phone number, you can text me, but as all of you know, I don't answer very often. Right now, it's tough to find out about my concert art music because I have also learned where I'm not willing to do certain kinds of work, and keeping my professional composer website up and running is one of those things. But you can find out about the band. Everything that we do is at Iron Fist Online. So you can just go to ironfistonline.com, and that's our official page. We do most of our social interaction through Facebook, so that's facebook.com/ironfistonline. We are on Bandcamp, and I think Mike, my bandmate, handles Twittery things, and possibly even Instagram. And we have some stuff on YouTube.
Alrighty.
We're there.
Very cool. Well, thank you, everyone. And if you have anything that you would like help with in terms of a life transition or just being stuck in general and wanting to get clarity on that, you can contact me through my website, wingsunfolded.com. And you can find all of these videos on Facebook, but if you don't feel like scrolling through a bunch of stuff, you can also go to YouTube and find under my name, Tess Miller, and the playlist Growing in Uncertainty. All of those videos are there. They're also on my website, In the Nest. So thank you again.
She's really good.
Well, thanks. You're totally biased, though. No one's going to believe anything that you say. Okay.
Go ahead,
anyway, so remember that it is okay to be stuck, but you don't have to stay there. Take care.